Welcome back to the Cold War, episode 295, the Cuban Revolution, Ray. In our
Yes.
last episode, 26-year-old Fidel Castro and a group of spunky volunteers
Right.
tried to take the second largest barracks in Cuba, 26th of July 1953, the Moncada Barracks.
Yeah.
And it failed dismally.
Well, I mean, he's a great speaker, probably a good lover, loves cigars, could talk about politics all night long. Military operations, there's room for improvement. Some things were out of his control. That went bad, went pear-shaped. But yeah, they got the hell out of there. Those who didn't make it were captured, tortured, and killed. But most of them got out, and now it's like, what do we do now?
I don't think most of them got out.
No?
A small number of them
Oh,
got
okay.
out. Most of them got captured and executed. Yeah.
Okay, I don't do math. Thank you.
Wasn't in your 5 pages of
It
notes.
was not.
No, no. So Fidel gets out. Raul gets out.
Yes.
Some others get out. A lot get captured. Castro's idea, Fidel's idea, was to cross over the mountains
Right.
to the other side of Cuba and continue fighting in that area. Like, this is one of the things that always has impressed me about Castro, and we'll see this later on when things go badly for him again,
Right.
when he comes back from Mexico, from exile in Mexico. But when the chips are down,
Yeah.
and his plans go to shit,
Right.
he doesn't give up.
No.
He doubles down every time. He's
Hard.
like,
Yeah.
he's like the knight in Monty Python. 'Tis a scratch, 'tis but a scratch. You've got no arms
Black
or
Knight,
legs.
that's
I'll
right.
bite you to death. The
That's
Black
right.
Knight, yeah.
I'll do you in. I'll do you, mate. Yeah. No.
Come back, you coward, and fight. He, like, it says something about,
Yeah.
like, we've talked about this. I remember on the Alexander series, Alexander, I can't remember which fort he was taking, but he climbed up the ladder when the men couldn't get over, and he just jumps over himself and gets shot through the chest with an arrow for his trouble.
Arrow in the lung.
But
yeah.
like, the way that we talked about Alexander's lack of giving a fuck about his own life back then was that it was a win-win situation.
Exactly.
If he does it and pulls it off, he's a hero.
Right.
If he does it and he dies, he's a hero for being brave.
They'll talk about me.
They'll have poems written about it.
Podcasts and movies.
Epic poetry.
Yeah. They get an Irish actor or whatever he was. I don't know what that was. Yeah. No. I'll be famous forever.
So I think that was Alexander's model. Caesar, a little bit the same when he refuses to have a bodyguard when he's dictator. And he goes, look, if they want to kill me, they'll kill me.
Right here.
Like, I'm not going to.
Right here.
Yeah,
Come on,
right.
come
I'm here to do my thing. If you don't like it, kill me.
They're like, okay.
People will talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, okay.
Napoleon, in his younger days in particular, would lead the army into battle. Later on, he realized he was too important.
Right.
He'd be back on the edges, keeping an eye on things and,
But for a
giving
while.
strategy. But he was still going, like, compared to every other monarch in Europe at the time, they didn't even go on the battlefield. They
No.
were at home in the castle.
Next to the buffet.
Napoleon would go on the march,
Yep.
be on the battlefield. He would put himself in the middle of the action, maybe not leading the charge in the
Right.
latter part of his career, but he was definitely doing way, way more than any other monarch
At the time.
did.
Yeah.
And Castro's one of these guys as well. He doesn't care he does care, but he's prepared to die. Let's put it that
Sacrifice.
way.
Yeah.
For the cause.
Exactly.
Yeah. If I'm asking you to put your life on the line, I have to be prepared to put my life on the line as well. But he also refuses to give up. He believes he's going to die trying than giving up.
Well, one, that was my attitude pursuing Heather, but two, in my 5 pages of notes that I will be sending you after we record this, one of the things was when Castro starts gathering his people. It's almost, and I don't want to go too far with this example, but it's almost like a religious whatever. He's like, everybody is to give up alcohol. Everybody is to be fully dedicated. And if there's anything that you do that I don't like, you are out. I mean, for him, this was a cause. This was a crusade, because they were literally trying to save the people of Cuba from the latest tyrant. So again, he had very high standards for these people, and if he's going to demand it of them, he clearly must demand it of himself as well.
Like, I demand it from you
all the time,
which is hobnobbing, no drinking whiskey and playing pool with your other boyfriends.
I will cut them loose tonight.
It's also like us in podcasting. Like, we refuse to give up. People say to us, why are you wasting your time? No one cares. Yeah.
We care.
Like, no. We're on a mission from God.
We care. That's right. I don't want to let God down. Don't let God down.
We're not qualified to do anything else. So
that's what it comes down to. Really, if you want the nub, we can't do anything.
What else are we going to do? Yeah, who's going to give us a job at this stage of our lives?
If you were to, because I've been doing this since. I know I haven't been doing it as long as you, but my resume for right now, the way it stands, it's not impressive. I have to ride this bitch out. This is all I got. It wasn't
impressive to start with.
But it's even worse now. I mean, so if I had to explain what I've been doing for the last 12 years.
You were a door bitch at Walmart when I met you.
Door bastard. Thank you. No.
At least I had a career at some point.
That's hurtful, but true. But no, this is all we can do at this point.
It's been 20 years since I've had a job.
Yeah.
On my resume, it's just got ... after 2004. And they go, what have you doing?
Whatever.
A bit of this, bit of that.
Day by day. I take it day by day.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So, Castro is going to cross the mountains, but he's at sea level. And the mountain range is up 3,000 feet.
And a high.
So he sets off. He has about, I think all up, he leaves the farm with 19 guys, including himself.
Hearts of gold.
And they start the hike up the mountains with a few weapons. But Batista's forces are out hunting them. They're traveling in vehicles across highways and mountain roads. So they figured, they were going to go up the mountains probably.
Yeah.
So they went up and stationed themselves across all the high points. Mm-hmm. So he's hiding out in the mountains from Batista's troops that are hunting him down.
Yeah.
And over the next couple of weeks, he loses all but 2 of his men to injuries and weakness. They don't have any food.
Right.
It's cold. It's wet. They're,
the elements
hiking through the mountains. Yeah. They're tripping over. They're breaking things.
Goat attacks.
So it's him and 2 guys hiding from Batista's army. Again, any sensible, reasonable person at this stage would give up. He's 26, for fuck's sake. At some point, you're going to maybe, you know what, I didn't think this through. Maybe I'm young and stupid and I shouldn't be doing this. Well, this is not going well.
Because this is Cuba, I can say this nowadays. I can use a baseball metaphor. Look, we swung for the fences. We missed. Okay. Maybe we should let's just walk back down and give ourselves up. But no, this is for Cuba.
But not Fidel Castro.
No, goddamn right.
And eventually, he said later in life, they made another stupid mistake. His first stupid mistake. By the way, later in life, he said the strategy that he had for taking Moncada, he wouldn't change a thing. That was the right strategy. He said, if I had my time over again, I would do exactly the same thing. Taking the barracks to get the weapons, taking it when they did, how they did, should have worked.
Right.
The only thing he would have changed is not stop when he saw that patrol.
Right.
Keep going. Proceed with the plan.
Push ahead.
He would have done that,
Yeah.
But the second stupid mistake was after weeks of hiking in the cold and the wet and the famine, starving, instead of sleeping in the woods like they'd done every night, they found a tiny little shed that was used to keep plants and things in. And they spent the night in that tiny little shed. And while they were asleep, the door burst open. Here's a bunch of soldiers pointing guns at them, and they were captured.
Just one night of decent sleep was all I wanted. And Colonel Chaviano's men, who originally wanted to kill 10 rebels for every soldier that was killed, finally has got his man. So Castro is captured.
That all you got in your notes?
You
got more?
But it was just those 5 pages. Oh, I will say this during those weeks, and it kind of doesn't matter what, because this colonel really wanted to go to town. And if you have any kids listening, just don't let them listen for the next 10 seconds. But that lady that you mentioned, was it her brother that had his eyes gouged out by bayonets? The point is, the soldiers were going hard for revenge, and there was a lot of torture going on. In fact, some room in the barracks was used as the torture room, and there was blood all over the place. But anyways, this colonel's going balls to the wall. Who knows what Batista knew? He probably would have been okay with it. However, he did institute martial law. He did put the army on a island-wide alert. He did he had strict censorship for the press. He did suspend the prison code, which is what the police have to. They have to be responsible for the lives of the prisoners. So the government went pretty extreme. The colonel went even further, but now they have their man. And I think is it an archbishop who's going to go, whoa, we need to calm down with the killings.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll stop right there.
Yeah, you're jumping way ahead.
I'm jumping way ahead.
I believe it was Batista who gave the direct order that 10 rebels had to be killed for every Cuban soldier who was killed in the attack. It's his own form of decimation.
Right.
Fidel says when they got arrested, there was a dozen or so soldiers. They looked furious. He said they had veins and arteries throbbing in their necks. They wanted to kill them on the spot.
Right.
But a big argument broke out between him and the soldiers. He was saying, we are the successors to Jose Marti. They said, no, we're the successors to Jose Marti. He said, no,
I am
part of a coup regime. You guys are a disgrace to the people. Anyway, Fidel and his men were tied up, and he said they didn't recognize him because he was emaciated, been hiking, no food.
Beard.
Scruffy looking, had started to grow a beard, keeping in mind that Fidel, before this stage, didn't have the revolutionary beard.
Exactly.
When we get to the actual Cuban Revolution part of this, we'll explain the role of the beards and why they grew beards the way they grew them. But this was before that.
Right.
He just had a mustache. If you see the photos of him before this, a mustache, clean shaven apart from that. Now he's scruffy beard, scruffy hair, etc., etc.
Right.
They asked him his name and he gave them some fake name. He said there was some joke he remembered that had some guy's name in it, so he just blurted that out. He said if I'd spoken my own name, they would have killed me then and there.
Right.
Many of the soldiers wanted to kill him anyway, but Fidel says there was one lieutenant, a tall black man, 30 or 40 years old, by the name of Lieutenant Sarria. Apparently he was studying law in his spare time, and he was trying to restrain the soldiers by saying, don't shoot, ideas can't be killed. Fidel says he just kept muttering it over and over. Ideas can't be killed. Ideas can't be killed.
Like that.
Ideas can't be killed. Don't kill them. Ideas can't be killed. Which I think is something similar to what Che Guevara said when he was assassinated by the CIA's henchmen decade and change later. But anyway, this guy didn't know who Fidel was either, but apparently he convinced them not to kill Fidel and the other guys on the spot.
Right. Oh, I don't want to skip over this, but I did want to ask, when this all went down, the average Cuban, shocked at what Castro, or not, maybe shocked might be too strong of a word, whatever, what they were doing. But then rumors started getting out about the torture and about the murder of what the soldiers were doing. And then I think photos were getting smuggled out. And so the people went from being disappointed at Castro to disgusted with the army and the regime. So again, the atmosphere, politically speaking, is changing in the country while Castro is hiding in the mountains. The people are just going, God dang, calm down. So again, he's getting more sympathy now at the end than he was at the beginning.
We have to keep in mind that this is Cuba that has had X number of revolutions and civil wars that we've covered in the preceding 60, 70 years. So it's not like people are like, oh, clutching their pearls.
Right,
Oh, my
right,
God,
yeah.
armed revolution in Cuba. Whatever shall we do? This is normal for Cuba.
Yeah, the gangster stuff we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, and Batista's just had a coup to take government. So this isn't shocking to the Cuban people like we may think of it in the West. If there was a military coup or an attempted coup in Australia, everyone would be like, "Go, what the fuck is going on?"
Right.
But this is like a Tuesday in Cuba at the time, right?
Yeah. But the stories of torture were, coming out pretty regularly. I don't know. I'm just saying a little bit of torture here between friends is one thing, but I think that it just kept going. So I don't know. I don't want to sell it too hard. I didn't mean to, but yeah, I mean, sympathies, might have started switching sides to a degree.
Yeah, torture and summary executions are another thing entirely.
Yeah.
So Fidel and his men are marched out of the shed, and suddenly he said they heard shots coming from the same direction that the soldiers were taking them in.
Right.
Apparently, a farmer they had left some of their men with previously had made contact with an army patrol. And it was at this point that the black lieutenant ordered Fidel and his men to hit the ground. Now, Fidel thought they were just going to execute them on the spot, so he refused to get down. He said, if you want to kill me while I'm standing.
Right.
He thought it was some sort of a trick to just execute them, on their knees or lying down or whatever.
Yeah.
The lieutenant said to him, "You are very brave, muchachos. You are very brave boys." And as it was at that point that Fidel told him, "Listen, I want to tell you something. I am Fidel Castro." And the black lieutenant said, "Shh, don't tell anyone. Don't tell."
Yeah. Good call.
So Fidel is like trusting this guy now as a good guy, a man of respect. Then when they came across the commandante for this patrol, Chaviano, he ordered the lieutenant to turn the prisoners over to him, but the lieutenant refused. He said, "This man is my prisoner and I take responsibility for him."
Yeah.
He's protecting the lives of the prisoners. So Fidel later says this guy saved his life several times over the course of that day.
Pretty an angel.
Instead of taking him to Moncada Barracks, where they would have executed him on the spot, this Lieutenant Sarria took him to a police station, a civilian prison in the center of the city, which was under the jurisdiction of the courts and not the military. When the revolution was over in 1959, Fidel promoted Sarria to captain and made him the aide to the first president of the republic.
Wow. Some good deeds do get rewarded. Guardian angel, if you will, for Castro.
But when it was found out later on that it was Fidel that Sarria had saved, Sarria was not very well treated.
No, he didn't go
Batista in the army.
Yeah, he didn't rise very far in the army.
But Fidel looked after him later on. He said, unfortunately, he didn't live very long after that. He died of some illness a few years later, but
such as life.
He did reward him for protecting Fidel at that point.
Good guy, Castro.
So, as I said before, Batista sent direct orders that 10 rebels had to be shot for every dead soldier. More than 70 guerrillas were shot in captivity. Word got out, as you said. Public opinion turned against the regime, and then the Catholic Archbishop of Santiago arced up and they stopped the killings. A trial was held in Santiago in September. Castro was put on trial along with more than 100 defendants, many of whom had nothing to do with it. They were just local lefties who they picked up after the Moncada attack.
Yeah.
And Castro, being a qualified lawyer, took on their defense.
I'll do it. Yeah.
And based his case on the illegality of the regime and the inherent right of a citizen to rebel against an illegal government.
Right.
Theory, it's not illegal to attack an illegal government.
Makes sense to me. That makes total sense to me. I will say this.
Hard to argue,
Right.
right?
I will say this. So they're starting the trial, and everybody who's being charged, they still have handcuffs on, whether it's the number of them or whether it's the policy, the procedure, whether it's to embarrass them. I have no idea, but they've all got the handcuffs on. Castro comes out of the gate swinging. He says to the judges, look, we're here. We're being charged. You've got guards all over the place. This is not how we should be treated. I'm sure he used some other legalese as well. And the judges went, yeah, you're right. And they took all their handcuffs off. So again, right out of the gate, Castro knows the law, very good speaker, and is able to get this minor victory. So at least they don't look guilty as fuck in front of everybody because they have handcuffs on. So he's going for it. He's got nothing to lose at this point, and he's just getting started educating these judges and others in the law of Cuba. This guy's going to take them for a ride.
When he was asked who was behind the attack, he said, the intellectual author of this revolution is Jose Marti, the apostle of our independence.
I love that. Who's going to argue with that?
So his defense was so successful that only 26 prisoners were found guilty, and most of those were treated fairly leniently. The Santiago judges still retain their independence from the Batista regime at this stage, but Raul was sentenced to 13 years in prison for being one of the leaders. Fidel was so successful at denouncing the regime that after 3 days, they decided they had to get him out of court and try him in secret later. So doctors were ordered by the regime to say that he was too sick to continue, even though he says he was in perfect health.
Right.
In one of his memoirs, he said they came to him and they said, look, we've got to do this. And he said, you do what you got to do, but this is going to be on your conscience that you're doing this. But, I respect that you need to do what you need to do. And he said they needed to do it to save their own asses, right?
Absolutely.
So he didn't hold the doctors in any disregard for doing it. But they got him out. He was then held in solitary confinement. They prevented him from talking to any of his comrades. So he went on a hunger strike. Told the soldiers they could shove their food up their own assholes. He said later on in life that he figured he was a dead man walking anyway, so it didn't matter. But again, word got out to public about how he was being treated, and we know that he was a bit of a legend and a bit of a hero in large parts of the population before this. And now he's, tried this revolution, got arrested. He's very popular. So they relented, they let him talk to his friends, and he agreed to start eating again. He was brought before a different court in October, which was a secret trial held in the nurse's room of a civilian hospital.
Right. His own private little trial. And this is the day after
Kangaroo
everybody
court trial.
And this is the day that after everybody else, this is October 16th, the day after everybody else has been sentenced or released or whatever happened. This is just for him because, and you're right, there's not a lot of people there, but there is, I think, one, I don't know what exactly to call her, a reporter or whatever, because she's going to write down some important stuff that Castro is going to say during this day.
Yeah, tell me more.
Okay, so let's see here. So it's so he's in this nurse's room in the civilian hospital, and he has to be there because technically he's still ill, even though he isn't. And he's like, wow, you're about to put me away for 20 or 15 years in less than 2 minutes. I should be able to say something. And I think it's 3 judges. And they go, okay, you can say something. Castro speaks for 2 hours. He goes on. He talks about everything. And as I think we might have mentioned this before, this speech will later be written out and it's going to be called History Will Absolve Me. Anyways. So he talks, and you mentioned this a minute ago, he talks about how his rights were violated. He did not blame the common soldier. They were simply following orders, but they too are victims of this corrupt government. He talked about he wanted to help. He did what he did because he's trying to help the poor farm workers. He's trying to help the underpaid. He's trying to help the ill housed. He's trying to help the industrial workers, the undervalued teachers, the small businessmen, the professionals who aren't allowed to use their skills. He wants to reinstate the Constitution of 1940. He wants land reform. He wants some of the profits to go to the workers. He's going to take land from the foreign owners and give it to the people so it can be worked by Cubans for Cubans. He goes on to all the stuff. And as he's talking, not once does he mention Lenin. He doesn't mention Marx. He does talk about his right to use force because, again, as you said, he's overthrowing a tyrant. And a journalist is there and she's writing all this stuff down. Castro finishes. The three judges put their heads together. Okay, 15 years in prison. So he made his speech. He said, again, I think you're right. I think he assumed he was a dead man walking. So he got it all off his chest. But the idea of what he said would be saved by this woman who was writing things down. But now he is looking at 15 years in prison. His brother Raul is going to get 13 years in prison. As far as we know, the movement is dead.
So he gives a 2-hour speech worthy of Cicero. He wasn't allowed to give the full speech, right. But it was later smuggled out of prison and published. But he finished with a pretty famous line. He says, "I know that imprisonment will be harder for me than it has ever been for anyone, filled with cowardly threats and hideous cruelty. But I do not fear prison, as I do not fear the fury of the miserable tyrant who took the lives of 70 of my compañeros. Condemn me. It does not matter. History will absolve me."
Love that. That and ideas do not die. That's pretty fucking cool.
And history will absolve me, as the speech became known. It was later published. It became sort of the manifesto of his revolutionary movement. And he gave details of the 5 revolutionary laws that would have been put into place if the attack on Moncada had been successful and he'd been able to overthrow the government.
Right.
The first was to return power to the people and to reinstate the Constitution of 1940. Mm-hmm. The second dealt with land rights. He promised that everyone holding less than 165 acres or squatting on them would receive title to the land, while existing owners would be indemnified on the basis of the value of a 10-year rental. A third law would have given workers in large industrial and mining enterprises the right to share in 30% of the profits. A fourth granted sugar planters the right to 55% of the profits of their production.
It's hard work, yeah.
A fifth law attacked corruption and would have confiscated the holdings of those found guilty of fraud during earlier governments. Half of the property recovered would be used to subsidize workers' pension funds, and the rest would go to hospitals, asylums, and charitable organizations.
Could I just say real quick, when they first captured Castro, and I think the last 2 guys, that colonel, that bloodthirsty colonel, at first gave the press access to Castro because he's admitting everything. Yeah, I did this. And so the press is talking to him. They even let him go on the radio. And he's like, so what was supposed to be was it was almost supposed to be give Castro enough rope to hang himself. But what he's going is like, yeah, I did this because I wanted to help the poor. I wanted to help the oppressed. I want to help those who don't have land. I want to help those who've had everything taken from them. And in a very short order, the public opinion again starts to turn and people are going, well, that sounds like good stuff. The government quickly realized, or at least the colonel realized he fucked up. And they stopped it. But for a while, they were letting him talk because they believed the fact that he was confessing to everything. But he also stuck in why he was doing it. And it kind of blew up in the government's face. And again, here, everything you just said, I'm like, that's all good stuff. If you're a Cuban, if you're a rich white guy in America and you own some land in Cuba, not so much.
So if you're a rich Cuban.
Yeah. Not good for you.
You're not going to like it.
Exactly.
I said before it was a secret trial, but as you say, there were journalists there, but they weren't allowed to report on much of it. There were some basic details about the fact that Castro was haranguing the judges, but a lot of it was edited and censored.
Yeah.
For the public.
Right.
So he didn't really mention the United States in the speech, but he did say that Cuba, under a revolutionary government, would become the bulwark of liberty and not a shameful link in the chain of despotism. But none of this was enough to get him off, and he was sentenced to 15 years in prison, and he joined his brother and other surviving compañeros in the jail on the Isle of Pines. And he was kept in solitary confinement there for many months. I couldn't work out exactly how long, but I think it was somewhere like 6. I know it was a lot more than 4.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, they said it was going to be 4, and then it dragged on and on. But he was able to write letters eventually when he was in there, and those letters have been published. I read through those letters, and I'm going to read a couple of them at the end of this episode because they're pretty impressive.
Right.
He was eventually, he wasn't supposed to be able to get reading material, but he did get some. He would ask people to send him books. He wanted to educate himself while he was in prison. He was able to study. He read about Napoleon and Lenin and even Roosevelt, which I'll quote later on.
Right.
His lover at the time, who you mentioned, I think in the last episode, Natalia Revuelta,
Mm-hmm.
kept up an exchange of love letters with him.
Yeah.
And by the way, she lived until 2015. They had a daughter together,
right?
1956.
I want to be Cuban,
but their relationship, didn't last.
Right. Yeah,
he ended up only serving.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, the letters to his wife were kind of not warm, whereas the letters to his lover, you might not be surprised, were quite affectionate. And so, yeah, just a very strange marriage. And there was one instance, supposedly, where the guards purposefully switched the letters and they sent the letter from the lover to the wife and from the wife to the lover. So his wife knew, supposedly, allegedly, that he was seeing somebody, if she didn't already know. Anyways, so very, just like anybody else, a very complicated person when it comes to matters of the heart.
Like RFK Jr. and Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Who I just see popped up on my news alerts has announced he's changing the name of the Department of Defense tomorrow to the War Department.
God damn right. Let's bring back war.
Yeah.
Make war great again. I'm done. Go ahead.
Castro only served 2 years of his 15-year sentence. Another presidential election had taken place in November of 1954 while he was in prison. Batista was the only candidate. The former president, Grau Sol Martin, had put his own name forward.
Right.
But realizing that the elections would be fraudulent, he withdrew and Batista just declared himself the winner. There was a huge public campaign demanding reforms, so he announced the return of constitutional rule with guarantees of a free press and promised an amnesty for political prisoners, including the Castro brothers, so they get released in May of 1955.
Still 2 years. Could you do 2 years in prison? I mean, that's still a long time, you know.
Yeah, and as I said, like 6 months in solitary confinement.
Yeah, I mean, Hitler only did 9 months. But anyways, 2 years. He's got a streak, right? Oh, and by this time, as you can imagine, he is the most famous Cuban on the whole fucking island, between the raid, between hiding in the mountains, and now the trial, and now the book that's going to be coming out, and now his 2 years in prison. He is Time's man of Cuba, if you will.
Yeah. And he says that it was while he was in prison that he learned how to become a revolutionary, because he studied the works of previous revolutionaries. And later in life, as I said, he's talking about the Moncada Barracks attack. He said he would have done it exactly the same way. The strategy was good. They just lacked sufficient combat experience.
Yeah.
But he said he was lucky that it failed, because he said if it had succeeded, it would have been the wrong timing. He said, although he hadn't calculated it, the support of the USSR was critical after the revolution succeeded in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't have had that support in 1953 because Stalin had only died a few months earlier. It was still the Stalin era. It was before the Khrushchev reforms, the thawing under Khrushchev.
Mm-hmm.
And the country was in disarray after Stalin died. So they wouldn't have got the support of the USSR if they'd succeeded. So he said, actually, it was a good thing that it failed, because if it had succeeded, we wouldn't have had their support to hold off the United States.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And at the time of the attack on Moncada, Castro said it wasn't a socialist revolution. You said before that his younger brother Raul was more of a socialist than he was. It was just a revolution about sovereignty and independence for the Cuban people. But he said, if you read the speech, History Will Absolve Me, had all of the basic elements of a future socialist revolution, which would be carried out gradually, progressively over time. And it's interesting for me to note that at the time, in 1953, when he carried out the Moncada Barracks attack, there were no other guerrilla wars going on in Latin America. He said he didn't know anything about Mao's Long March. That nothing had been published really about that he'd been able to read at that stage.
Right.
He didn't know anything that was going on in Vietnam and what Ho Chi Minh was doing, 1953. Mm-hmm. His revolution wasn't being led by the Soviet Union or inspired or supported by any other socialist revolution happening around the world. You know, the US, we know, had this idea during the Cold War that the Soviet Union was going to try and orchestrate or engineer socialist revolutions around the world.
Right.
Castro had no connection with the Soviet Union at this point in time, or with Ho Chi Minh, or with Mao, or with Kim in North Korea.
Right.
This was and this wasn't even a socialist revolution. This was a wholly independent nationalist revolution for independence by the Cuban people.
Homegrown, exactly.
I want to wrap up by reading a few things from his letters. A few episodes ago, I read from a letter that Fidel wrote where he talked about Napoleon and Caesar. That was written in prison in 1954. I want to read another one.
All right.
Two more I'm going to read from, then we'll wrap it up. He said, I have been informed that 2 books were confiscated. These are books that he'd asked people to send him. One of them is Trotsky's Stalin. I suppose this was done because it is called Stalin, because I cannot conceive of any other reason for such an action. Even if it had been written by a supporter of Stalin and were a defense of him, I sincerely do not believe that should be a reason for confiscating it. But the fact is that in this case, we are not dealing with an impartial critical study. This book was written against Stalin by Leon Trotsky, his most irreconcilable enemy. Far from being a defense, it is an implacable attack on him. As you can see, the reason that might be adduced for confiscating it does not exist. I don't know what the other book is, but I suspect it is Curzio Malaparte's The Techniques of Coup d'etat, because I seem to remember someone told me it was coming.
Right.
I know this book well, and it is nothing but a fanciful version of fascist, Nazi, phalangist, and other coup d'etat, which does not stick to historical truth since its author is more a novelist than a historian. It has no practical value. Sometimes I am sent books that I've already read, but all right, because it is such a suggestive title, I admit that objections might be raised. In any case, I'm not interested in this book, if it is the other one that was confiscated. But I am interested in the first one. But I assure you there is no reason at all for retaining it. It seems to me that a mistake has been made. Look into it and see for yourself. It is a great source of concern for me that a book I requested, such as this one by Trotsky, should be confiscated simply because of its title without examining its contents. This business of censorship should be handled with a sense of justice. Everybody reads in accordance with his education and culture. The study of economic, social, or philosophical questions requires books and authors with the most diverse viewpoints, so one can analyze, compare, etc. Without the freedom to read, one cannot study either religious or socio-political doctrines. Shut up in this building, I spend all my time studying. In doing so, I am not hurting or bothering anyone, nor does this damage the prison or the state. I'm not asking for improvements of any kind or changes in the prison regulations.
Fair.
Now, interesting this on a couple of fronts. Number one, he's asking for Trotsky's book that's an attack on Stalin.
Right.
Keeping in mind that the West thought that Stalin was orchestrating revolutions around the world.
Yeah.
The guy trying to do a revolution in Cuba is asking for in a book that is an out-and-out attack on Stalin.
And he's told no. Okay.
Yeah.
Cold War mentality
Secondly,
doesn't make sense. Go ahead.
You mentioned something about anti-intellectualism before. Castro was an intellectual and a very proud intellectual. He was a student of history. He was very erudite, obviously. He gave 4-hour speeches on a regular basis. If you go and watch any of the interviews, long-form interviews with him, particularly I highly recommend, if people haven't watched it, the interviews that Oliver Stone did with him before he passed away. It's like many, many hours of interviews with him, and they're absolutely brilliant. He's quite old, probably in his 80s at that stage.
Right.
Incredibly articulate and erudite and sophisticated, and understands history and philosophy and politics nearly as well as you do, but not quite, because, I don't think he ever wrote 5 pages of notes.
Everybody should aim high. Go ahead.
So definitely not an anti-intellectual. But the other interesting thing in this is we know that he did, when he took over the state, ban certain books and, reading material and stuff. So it'll be interesting to see when we get to that part of the revolution what his policy is on censorship,
Right.
and how that counterpoints against the argument that he's making when he's in prison. Of course, at the time that he's writing this, for all intents and purposes, he was about to spend 15 years in prison. So the fact that he's reading books on revolutions and stuff should not, no one should care about that. Right. He's in jail for the next 15 years. Who gives a shit?
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
But they obviously did, and they were censoring what he could read.
Yeah.
The second letter I have, written from the same period, actually it's dated April 15th, 1954, is about his desire to read about Roosevelt.
Oh, okay.
He wrote, Roosevelt, I mainly want information on him. His policy of raising agricultural prices, the promotion and conservation of soil fertility, credit facilities, the debt moratorium, and the extension of markets at home and abroad in agriculture. In the social field, how he provided more jobs, shortened the workday, raised wages, and pushed through social assistance to the unemployed, the old, and the disabled. And in the field of the general economy, his reorganization of industry, new tax systems, regulation of trusts and banking and monetary reforms. It is curious how similar all the great social reforms have been from antiquity to the present. Many of the measures taken by the Paris Commune in 1871 were similar to laws decreed by Julius Caesar. The problems of land, housing, debt, and unemployment have arisen in all societies dating back to ancient history. I'm inspired by the grand spectacle of the great revolutions of history because they've always signified the triumph of aims embodying the welfare and happiness of the vast majority as opposed to a tiny group of vested interests. Do you know what episode really moves me? The revolution of the black slaves in Haiti. At a time when Napoleon was imitating Caesar and France resembled Rome, the soul of Spartacus was reborn in Toussaint Louverture. How little importance is given to the fact that the African slaves who rebelled set up a free republic, defeating the greatest generals Napoleon had. It's true that Haiti has not progressed very much since then, but have the other Latin American republics done any better? I keep thinking about these things because, frankly, how pleased I would be to revolutionize this country from top to bottom. I am sure that all the people could be happy, and for them I would be ready to incur the hatred and ill will of a few thousand individuals, including some of my relatives, half of my acquaintances, 2/3 of my professional colleagues, and 4/5 of my former schoolmates.
Damn. That's a hell of a sentence.
If anyone wants to know more about the revolution of Toussaint Louverture, David Markham and I and our friend Nicholas Stark did several episodes on it back in the Napoleon podcast days. It is a fascinating period, and it's probably one of the blackest marks, I think, on Napoleon's reputation. I mean, David justified why he felt the need to shut it down, but it sort of cuts both ways.
Right.
There was a revolution against the revolutionary government and the treatment of slaves, and people were getting threatened and people were getting killed and buildings were getting burnt, and he sent in troops to calm them the fuck down. But
Yeah.
it's complicated. But yeah, definitely worth reading or listening in that case to more of that.
Ooh.
So I think that's where we wrap it up, unless you have more in your many, many pages of notes, Ray.
Just that he gets released in May of 1955. He's welcomed home by Raul Chivas, the brother of Eduardo Chivas. Believe it or not, he is not welcomed back into the Ortodoxo party because in jail he had written things about them, about the army, about Batista, who had brought back censorship. So again, he's coming out of jail, but he's coming out swinging. He's truly been cut by this party, even though that was pretty much an event before this. He's on his own. So whatever his future holds, it's in his hands.